Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore and the event director there. We're pleased to welcome a group of incredible writers this evening for a reading in support of Freedom House Detroit. Founded in 1983 and located in Southwest Detroit, Freedom House is a temporary home and lifetime community for indigent survivors of persecution from and around the world who are seeking asylum in the United States and Canada. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our dear friends and co-presenters this evening, the Michigan Quarterly Review. To donate to Freedom House, you can go to freedomhousedetroit.org/donate. If you're watching us later on YouTube, that link will be in the description directly below me as well. Please select in our own words a benefit reading as the gift inspiration, and all donations of $25 or more will receive a 1-year digital subscription to the Michigan Quarterly Review. And just a quick webinar overview, as I said, as you joined us, the chat is closed, but you can keep the chat window open as I will be sharing links to donate. And if you need live transcription, that feature is available to you on the bottom of your toolbar. As a reminder, you can also shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And if you live in Southeast Michigan, our doors are open to the public. If you'd like to donate to our ongoing programming, you can do so at literatibookstore.com/donation. Otherwise, we simply thank you for your attendance this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. And now allow me to introduce tonight's MC and first reader and host and the prime mover behind this wonderful reading this evening. Maria Zilberman was born in Minsk, Belarus, and came to the United States as a refugee at the age of 3. She earned an MFA at the University of Michigan and has received awards and fellowships from the Plowshares Emerging Writers Contest, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Yiddish Book Center, among others. Mostly recently, she was a development fellow with Freedom House Detroit. Please help me in, please join me in welcoming to your Zoom screen, Maria Zilberman.
Hi, thank you so much, John, for that introduction. Thank you for making all of this run. And thank you to our readers who are here tonight to share their words. This reading comes after a series of workshops that took place at Freedom House Detroit. Some of our panelists on the screen and readers tonight, and some folks who couldn't join us tonight, were instrumental in teaching workshops at Freedom House Detroit as part of Michigan Quarterly's Reviews Why We Write Community Workshop series. We taught in French, we a little bit taught in Spanish, we taught in English, we had residents who spoke Arabic who also joined our workshops. So we offered workshops in different languages to give residents at Freedom House an opportunity to, in their own words, express the experiences that they've had leaving home. I've spent the last year volunteering with Freedom House, and it's an organization that has grown close to my heart for the kinds of work that they do, for the ways that they provide holistically for folks who have had to leave home, often under major duress, and are seeking safety in a new life, in a new place, and under excruciating circumstances. And every year, there are tens of millions of people who are displaced and fleeing persecution. And Freedom House is one of the spots in the world that tries to be a balm to the kinds of threats and dangers that people are seeking. So tonight we are reading for them. We are reading to help you get familiar with this organization and to help bring awareness and hopefully donations to them to allow them to continue doing their work. So if you feel moved at any point tonight, please do donate. As John said, Michigan Quarterly Review, a co-presenter of this event, has generously donated or will be providing free digital subscriptions to anyone who donates over $25 to Freedom House Detroit. You'll have a link to that in the chat. So by all means, whatever you can give, if you can give tonight, it'll help Freedom House continue to provide the services and care and lifeline to so many people every year. So without further ado, I'm going to start tonight by reading a poem that was written by a young Freedom House resident from Uganda. This came out of our workshops with Freedom House, and I believe that the teacher for this particular workshop was H.R. Webster, managing editor of Michigan Quarterly Review, who has been an instrumental part of making all of this possible. They say home is best. And I don't doubt that, since I left home to seek new life beginnings. But then again, I'm reminded of the similarity in the difference between my old home and my new home, and how things can turn out the same. Like the difference in tasting different tender barbecue meats to tasting deep sea water shrimp and lobster is still a thrill when whichever has ketchup added to it. The difference in seeing darkness and evil on a day-to-day basis only to awake to car horns on busy streets and construction of new buildings, or maybe I'm trying to see the good in change. The difference in scent of dust settling on a rainy day to the scent of change of seasons, either from summer to winter or vice versa, is still very weird but satisfying petrichor. The difference between feeling love through touch of loved ones without any emotional expression to touching snow for my first time still reminds me how cold my heart is. The difference between hearing my mother cry to hearing gunshots and sirens, me not to get attached to anyone because I can still lose them in a moment. They say home is best, and I don't doubt that, since I left home to seek new beginnings. But then again, I'm reminded of the similarity and difference between my old home and my new home, and how things can turn out the same. And that poem was written by a young Freedom House resident whose country of origin is Uganda. And before we launch into the rest of our panel, I'm going to read two poems of mine, and thank you all for letting me share the stage with you. This first poem is called Yanka Kupala Street. It was written after I returned to Belarus in 2019. It was the first time I had been there in almost 30 years. Yanka Kupala Street. Family of metalsmiths who roofed this new city, I looked for our name in the cemetery, found great-grandmother in lime next to a wasp nest. Envelope full of matte faces and a weathered map, I laid stones all over, laid them in doubles for the years none were laid. In the cemetery, found great-grandmother in lime next to a wasp nest. Slaughter marker across from McDonald's, double tree near the mass grave. Place stones in doubles for the years none were laid. At the river's edge, a flock of geese cleaned their summer-plumped bodies. Slaughter marker across from McDonald's, and double tree near the mass grave. Green tufting out of the bone rock, every city grown from the dead. At the river's edge, a flock of geese cleaned their summer-plumped bodies. All that ocean and back to the same cutting waters. Green tufting out of the bone rock, air filled with the dead. Sunlight traces the fish-scaled roof of the circus, the family circus, as we claimed. All that ocean and back to the same cutting waters. Family of metalsmiths who roofed this new city, I looked for our name. And I'll read one more poem before we really get into the meat of our reading. This poem comes from that same trip. It's called Cusp Harvest. A pot of sour yellow plums simmers on the great gas stove. It is August, and the city hangs like a moss cloak, damp voices in a petri dish, little dog sick with heat. I stir the sugar as the tram roils along Kozlova Street, my wild nettle body shifting in its abundant skin. I wasn't always thin-stemmed, but these days I can't refuse children. It's how I ended up cooking 5 kilos of fruit in this sauna kitchen, mashing the pulp, straining each shiny skull from the juice. I'm a bad guest in a lost country. I don't presume to be wanted, sneaking into old buildings to touch doorknobs, photographing trash chutes. I leave cigarettes on benches and imagine my dead having a smoke. Motherland with no mother, only the phone bears a familiar timbre. In this long twilight of return, I cut the flame and let the tart compote cool. Right. Well, thank you all for joining us again, and thank you readers for being here tonight. Khaled Matawa couldn't join us tonight, unfortunately, but we wish he could, and we hope he will in the future. And tonight we will start our reading with Chris Tysh. Chris Tysh is a poet whose latest publications are Hotel des Archives, a trilogy, and Derrida's In Voice. She holds fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Kresge Foundation, as well as a Murray Jackson Creative Scholar in the Arts Award from Wayne State University, where she teaches. Please join me in welcoming Chris.
Thank you, Maria. I'm very pleased to be a part of this important reading and fundraiser. The work is absolutely necessary now more than ever. I'd like to read from a book that came out during a pandemic. It's called Derrida's In Voice, and it is based on part of Derrida's work, which was published in 1980 and called The Postcard, from Socrates to Freud and beyond. And it's published by a University of Chicago Press in the United States. And I just take some lines from Jacques Derrida and sort of take off from there. So here's a few of them. I'll read 4 of them. Can you hear me okay? Sometimes I wish all was illegible to them. Nothing so strange as Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward-facing dog, illegible, these vast American cities, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Detroit, ragged, crumbling piers abandoned like Moses in the bulrushes of the Nile. True that, as per The Wire, David Simon, 2002's clip parlance. In the scribbled chords of the theme song, something ruined, occluded, not meant to be brought back from the dead, tongues falling away andante behind a steep bluff. A narrative emerges, a premise or promise in spite of the text's effort to front its own unreadability. What eludes the human sensorium, or perhaps ça crève les yeux, depending on your standpoint, is the foolishness of being right, more foreign than the thin handwriting on the back of an old photograph to a groovy chick. Only groove I find in the pocket dictionary means furrow, rut, or trench. This whole va-et-vient to and fro movement of discourse poofs off my checkered skirt as I step on the metro gate. And the next one is called The Telephone Lady in Proust. Couldn't fathom that the short psh, psh, hiss of an oxygen tank during the quietest part of Shostakovich's Fifth was a sure sign or omen, like an eclipse or walking under a ladder that no man could ignore. Shrill electric bell echoes down my spine. La guerre est finie. Director Alain René, 1966. And the polysemous slip is here as long as you can hear bodies maneuvering algorithm, a sea of sound roaring to a stop. Ants in the pants have outlived every idiom of restlessness, incessant as la lutte des classes presaged the end of the poem. And this one is called With a Stroke of the Pen, a Scraper, I'll Derail Everything. In Coming Home, director Jean Gimou, 2014, Gongli's face, smooth as a snowy step, peers into a station crowd for her returning husband, 10 years behind bars. While unseen by her, he takes it all in, leaving aside for now the loaded loop of who sees whom, quilted coat, scarf, homemade sign, reminding me of Ezra Pound's The River Merchant's Wife, a Letter, Cathay, 1915. I grow older. If you are coming down through the narrows of the River Kiang, please let me know beforehand. I will come out to meet you as far as Chofu Sa. The very logic of longing. She rehearses on the 5th of every month that Gongli's character is both the site of historical amnesia and a placeholder for the past, opens the ledger to a different account. Slash mark on history's page. With a click of a mouse, I could delete the whole scene, boo, like Casper's ghost, only its mallow specter that wafts on the rim of our nostrils, lips, chest, paws, the ground by the blackened gates that guards now close on the last voyager. Will the new task, oh translators, be to run along the tracks of sound and sense or discharge the yet unsaid? And one more. I come from a family of people in which every generation moves away from the place they were born to. And I don't know if my children will repeat that. So Derrida says himself, moi qui ne suis même pas français. As you know, he was born in Algeria. I, who am not even French. Don't protest, it's a fact. We've always brought back to the Judas hole of where we from, crystalline form of a symptom. In back of the throat, a slight contraction holds itself in reserve, insinuates apartness, a patch of ice and drizzle. There's that rain again on the outskirts of town. Deserted at this hour of night, the wet avenue appears mouillé de larmes, as if it could write its own elegy. We are told that on the first day of school in 1942, you are expelled from Lycée Ben Aknoun at El Biar, Algiers. It is agreed this will kick off a chain of specters that mob your work, a path thick with mourning. Overlooking the harbor on the west coast of Iceland, the Library of Water, Ronnie Horn, 2007, inscribes its weather on the rubber floor, transparent and still, the glass columns, smooth mirrors at the very center of the world. And I'll read a few from a new work. This is a kind of a reverse abecedarian. This one is called Zone. You reverse the order of the poem, only to land at boarding gate 880, Zone 1. Embarquement immédiat, a voice echoes through the empty space with that sexy French cigarette voice, except the poem's got it all wrong. You haven't really been out since March, since before Corona, BC. It must confuse you with another time when people sat at cafes and argued about les gilets jaunes, booze, and faux amours. Woke. Is there a place where you press me about woke, the way you bite inside your lip as if to say, please, I wrote the damn bill, I know the score. The conductor joke gets lost in translation, but what remains open is the 24/7 all-you-can-eat opera bouffe with huge slabs of white layer cake stacked in the wings, before even bigger than the death contraption in Angels of America. Grief descends center stage, sweeping the crowd with its trapped maw. Villain. In the long line of villains, the poem asks, how immaterial is each act of perfidy? Shouldn't one instead stamp the whole crate, hazardous waste, flammable all cans, thrown down the balcony, rocking on your heels? You fall to thinking about the day you crossed your heart at Cheyne Park to say the pledge, facing the flag with 1,200 other brides. Strange to think of it as last century, as if installing air quotes around certain words made them less any ancient. Just a few more. Trace. Only a fraction of what occurred in your dream makes it to the top. Camouflage at that, like a drunken diva eluding her paparazzi, crossing a border with fake papers. You wonder if these writhing figures in the foreground are live wires left over at the old barracks, or whether you dreamt the same version, where manifest content inserts a blurry photograph and a column of hot air rises from a manhole. Scandal appears as soon as you're escorted off the train, a moment the poem files under RSA, repressive state apparatus, a knot of uniform squinting at your exit visa. In another instant, your stiletto heels clack like typewriter keys along an interminable corridor barely visible from the prison gate. Wrung dry, the hard shell of a new sentence comes into view, passing her lips, a smile in round brackets. And this last one, which is dedicated to Christine Hume. Ravine. Any mark on the body adds to the ledger of grievances. Roughly put, you bump up against her head, elbow, clavicle, pushing through her thin tee in the elliptical night's vast dominions. A thought begins to form around its grimy cup, remembering shadows of medallions at the part where young girls heave rocks down a ravine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that moving reading. Thank you for sharing your time and talents also with Freedom House. Chris was with us to teach workshops in French, which were, I think, very loved by the residents who were able to join her. Next, we're actually going to have Mercedes Pergande from Freedom House Detroit say a few words. Mercedes is the Development and Community Relations Coordinator at Freedom House and has been a great partner in making these workshops as well as this reading possible.
Thank you all. Can you hear me well? Awesome. So first, I just want to thank Maria, Chris, thank you for reciting. I'm very excited to hear everyone else. Bassam, Pemi, Vizo, Bassam, I'm sorry. I am Mercedes. I'm the Community Relations and Development Coordinator here at Freedom House Detroit. As we touched on a little bit, Freedom House is a home. It's a lifetime community. We provide a continuum of care for our clients, our residents. Part of that is providing what we call a place for those yearning to breathe free. It is a refuge. It is a place where we can say, this is Freedom House, you're safe now. I say that with the utmost seriousness. With every time we welcome a guest into our home, there is always that moment, there's that time frame where they kind of settle in and realize, okay, I am safe. I'm free from harm here. I'm free from persecution. And so that is what you all are supporting here. That is what you all are making possible. So I just cannot thank you all enough. I'm going to go over a little bit of what we provide here at Freedom House Detroit when we say continuum of care. What makes Freedom House Detroit a special place is that we provide everything that a survivor, persecution, and torture, better known as an asylum seeker, needs to not just escape and not just find that refuge, but also begin building their life and begin healing from that trauma. And that is one of the biggest things. Of course, gaining your asylum is right at the top of that list, but we also have to think about, you know, the wounds that take much longer to heal. So we provide the shelter, of course, all basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, anything that you would need in your own home to be happy and healthy, we provide. We also provide mental and medical care. So we have some really wonderful community partners for our clients who otherwise do not qualify for any kind of Medicaid, Medicare. That is not something that our clients qualify for. So we rely on folks in our community like yourselves to be able to fund Freedom House, and also our community partners to be able to give that service to our clients so they can begin the process of healing and rebuilding. We also provide pre-employment services, so that is really important. That is the English classes, that is resume building, that is volunteering, so that they can get an idea for what it's like working in America, and then connecting them with jobs once they have their work permit. We provide the attorney at no cost to apply for that work permit, to walk with them in their process for asylum. It is a very complex and in most times re-traumatizing experience. So having somebody in your corner that says, I'm fighting for you, I'm with you all the way, that is what our attorneys do. They work tirelessly to fight for our clients' asylum, and our stats are awe-inspiring. We see that, some studies show that just having an attorney raises your probability for gaining asylum by over 4 times. I believe ours are upwards of 90%. So upwards of 90% of our clients are granted asylum, and that is the difference most times between life and death. So this is truly life-saving work that you guys are supporting. So I just want to thank you all so much, and thank you for supporting Freedom House. Thank you for supporting our clients. And thank you for connecting them with such a beautiful opportunity to express themselves. As a poet myself, I completely understand the labor and the passion and, just everything that you can pour into work and working with others. So for those that led our workshops, I cannot thank you enough. It really was a transformational experience for the clients that participated. I'm partially passionate about our young folks, and they really, really did get some really wonderful direction and inspiration from you all. And I can't wait to show this recording to them as well. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Mercedes. It's great to sort of hear those details about the day in, day out work that you all support and the ways that you change people's lives. So we're going to continue with some more great poetry. Next, we have Vizo. So known on stage as Vizo, Alondra Alvizo is a Mexican-born poet raised in Detroit with a passion for growing plants, people, and artistic potential. Vizo has performed a variety of her original work on countless stages across the nation, with special performances at Big Ten universities, including University of Michigan and Michigan State University. Vizo uses poetry to bring alive the narratives of marginalized communities, in addition to honoring her own journey throughout life in academia. Aside from being a self-published author, Vizo also leads identity and poetry workshops and provides free bi-weekly poems bi-weekly via text to a growing subscribed audience. Vizo takes pride in building community and loves connecting with community members. So please feel free to follow her on Instagram, both at Vizo's Voice and at It's Vizo. And Vizo was another one of our wonderful workshop leaders during the community workshops. So please join me in welcoming Vizo.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here today, especially for such a good cause. So I will be reading from one of the poetry books that I released this year. It's called Queendom Come, and it talks about all the women in my life that have shaped what it means to be woman and how to carry yourself throughout the world and the challenges that we overcome as women. So it's actually the first poem in that book, and it's called Her Story. History written from a woman's perspective, emphasizing the role of women. You were born in San Miguel, Jalisco. You died in Compton, California. That is the immigrant story. Knowing that your birthplace will not be where you are buried, you taught us how to make a home out of foreign lands, how to go on after grief, how to celebrate life, and most importantly, how to love the world by starting with your own family. You married my great-grandfather, and he died too soon. You loved to talk about him. You were proud of having raised 9 children with him, 4 women, 5 men. Your house had birds and plants. Your house always had company. You loved to sing, and we all loved the sound of your voice. You went blind at the same age that Jesus died. And I always felt that was symbolic, but I never really knew why. As a young child, I once said to you, I think losing my sight would be the worst thing that I could ever lose. And you laughed and smiled softly before responding. You whispered, no, losing your voice would be worse. I am still learning how to not let the world silence me. Being blind never stopped you. You cut your own fruit, you brewed and poured your own coffee, you took yourself to the bathroom, you knew the way around your house without having to touch the walls, and that always amazed me. The way you learned to live with darkness. I wish you were still here so I could learn this from you now. You were funny. That's what I remember the most. I never heard you say a joke that was mean. You didn't believe in humiliation for humor. During those years, I didn't value your jokes enough. Now I wish I would have written them all down because I know that your humor is so hard to come by. We would come visit you once every year or every other year, always around your birthday. You believed in celebrating life, and we tried to make it for as many of your birthdays as we could. You knew how to party. You dance and sing and have all of us join you, young, old, Ingles, Espanol. It made no difference. You made all of us join you. You'd have some on guitars and some as the choir and some dancing, and most of us just watching you be free. You knew the lyrics to songs we couldn't even find on YouTube. You taught me about a world before mine. When we'd visit you, we'd all sleep in your room. It had 2 beds. You slept in the one closest to the wall, and you had a ton of blankets, and the room had no color scheme, but it was always welcoming. You would tell me bedtime stories of the love you had with my great-grandpa, and you talked about your life in Mexico and how different Compton was. You raised grandchildren and great-grandchildren like they were your own. A lot of the young ones in the family lived with you at some point. You taught us that raising children takes an entire family. You got sick over the years, but you never lost your spiritual health. You were a God-fearing woman, and I know that you are resting so peacefully, reunited with the love of your life and being a shining light for all of those you left behind. You died and you didn't leave us mourning. You left us divided. Women like you are forces of unity. During my recent travels to Los Angeles, I got to spend a night alone in your room. All of your pictures still on the walls, your clothes still in the closet, blankets on the chair near the window, just as I had remembered it growing up, except colder. While in California, I went to visit your grave. I thought about the last time I saw you alive. You looked tired, but still as vibrant as always. When it was time to say goodbye, I hugged you longer than usual. You told me you loved me and you hoped to see me again soon, and soon never arrived. Now that we've all learned to make homes out of foreign lands, now that we've all learned to go on after grief, I hope that we find a way to celebrate your life and legacy by loving each of our own family members better than we have since you've been gone. So sorry about my dog barking in the background. I have 2 big pit bulls and they believe in barking when we're on Zoom calls. So that's one of my poems, and I have one more for all of you today. Give me 1 second while I pull it up. Okay. This one is from my first book called Crown of Roses, and the title of this book is Leaves. 2014, summer. The leaves were attached to the trees. They were a vivid green. I could feel the air passing through my lungs. I was in tune with my own song. Fall 2015. I'm not sure how we arrived. I'm not even sure how we survived. I know that one day I was fine, and the next I felt my chest would burst from pain I could not explain. I felt my heart would sink into my stomach. I didn't know that this is what anxiety felt like. 2015, winter. I couldn't feel the trees. I could not touch the leaves. I craved nothing more than the vivid green engraved in a once beautiful scenery. The snow landed on my cheek. The cold must be what dying young feels like. 2016, spring. Here I was, living a life I hated because the world told me to. My narrative is my responsibility. I was tired of reading my own story. I packed an old suitcase with memories and rags. I sat on a plane for 16 hours. I thought long and hard about the life I wanted to live. 2016, summer. I climbed a tree. I sat there for hours, looking out at the agricultural scene. I connected with a land once unfamiliar. I connected with a body that thought healing was linear. I talked less and listened more, and it's amazing how much the earth tells you in each passing of the wind if you're ready to listen. 2017, fall. The return was beautiful. The regression was inevitable. I learned that love itself moves freely. I learned that what we don't cultivate doesn't grow. I learned that we should love more, starting with ourselves. There wasn't much time, but that's all my broke ass had. 2017, summer. Time has an odd way of allowing us to be who we are. If you give me space, I can make my mind a place worth visiting. Although I refuse to make a home inside my head, I know now that my entire identity started with my thoughts. 2018, fall. Let it go. Don't carry such heavy acts of cowardice on your heart. Don't allow yourself to tell yourself such negative thoughts. Let it go. Peacefully and with grace. You owe it to yourself. 2018, spring. I am sitting on my grandmother's couch, staring at the mango tree next door. I've never seen such long, skinny leaves. It's always summer here. I love being warm, but I dislike the heat. Here they are complaining about the wind, and here I am appreciating the sun. Without the terrible weather, I wouldn't know what a good climate was. I dislike the heat and I dislike the cold, but both prepare me to exist, I guess. 2019, summer. I am 23. I have made peace with the leaves. They taught me the most valuable lesson of life. Let go when necessary. Return when you're ready. Fall softly, and if crushed, make noise. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vizo. Those are gorgeous poems, and I am a sucker for a grandma poem, especially. So you really got me with that first one. Thank you for sharing that. Next, we are going to hear the work of Bassam Sidiki. Bassam is a Pakistani American writer, scholar, and critic, currently pursuing his PhD in English at the University of Michigan. He is the current nonfiction editor of Asymptote and former nonfiction editor at MQR. His poems, essays, and criticism have appeared or are forthcoming in Hyphen, Los Angeles Review of Books, the Bangalore Review, and many others. He has received a Hopwood Award for his creative nonfiction and honorable mentions for the Ora Mary Phelan Poetry Prize and the Hippocrates Prize for Poetry and Medicine. Please join me in welcoming Bassam to the Zoom stage.
Thank you so much, Maria, for the introduction, and you all can hear me, correct? Awesome. It's great to share a virtual stage with everybody here and for such a great cause. So thanks for having me. I'm going to start my timer. So I'm just going to read one poem, and then I'm going to read an excerpt from a creative nonfiction piece. So this first one is called A Life in Ginger Cats. We've heard some dogs, so now we'll hear from some cats. This poem appeared in Counterclock magazine this year. The first beckons the dusk. Oliver, Iowa. My parents call out to me, rusks dipped into their saffron evening tea. We scamper in circles, Oliver and I, on the first floor landing, a remnant of ribbon between us, midair like an Ouroboros of lonely child, feline friend. A stray, I christen him after Disney. He never sits in my lap, just laps up the milk we give him and prances away to other benefactors. I see him again only in other forms, like Spotty, the portly tomcat, who comes with our new house's sehen, ambling with insouciant ease through emerald shards of glass bottle lining the walls, or basking in palm-weaved Karachi sun on the charpai. He has no spots. He is a flame-kissed tabby, but he just looks like a Spotty, you know. He's naughty, too, pilfering from skewers the marinated meat for Eid al-Adha barbecues, or gobbling up the ducklings mom bought as the poor things paddled unsuspectingly in the plastic tub. He never came back one day when we returned from vacation, but we like to think that the one who comes after him is his offspring. A white queen with amber crown gives birth to him in our treehouse, a slight screaming peach. My sister names him Billy, Urdu for cat. Health is never on his side. We don't know how a being can grow smaller as it grows, a purring candle stunted by its own light. He's as hospitable to his worms as we are to him in our house. Let him piss smugly in our sinks, the rancid fluid gurgling with the sundry refuse of our reluctant mornings. He even pees on me once, but I forgive him. I don't have a choice because he's dead by the year after, before we leave the country. We were catless for a time. A few years ago, we got one who for the first time we don't have the privilege to name. He comes with one, Leo, regal, astrological, our first real house cat, a piebald domestic short-hair dapple like an amiable cow. He might as well be both himself and the ones who came before him, his eyes like a chartreuse stupor which severs the then and the now, the here and the there. We pet his immaculate crest, field of jasmine besieged by a sepia that has consumed so much. Youth, vigor, a husband, a father, a mother, land. He eats our hair and we let him because we recognize his yearning. Thank you. And this next one is an excerpt from an essay called Nostrographia. M.G. Vasanji's 2016 novel Nostalgia is set in a dystopian near future where people have achieved a kind of discontinuous immortality. They can discard their aged bodies like snakes slough off their skins, but they can also choose to up and leave their prior lives. New memories, fictions, are implanted in their brains while the old ones are excised, releasing these people from the oppressive familial obligations of their older selves. But the trouble is that those old memories may not be completely gone. The protagonist, Dr. Frank Sina, is a specialist in fictional memory and must treat a patient with exactly this kind of problem, what he dubs nostalgia or leaked memory syndrome. Presley Smith, Sina's patient, has been repeatedly hearing one bizarre and random phrase. It's midnight, the lion is out. Sina suspects that this is a memory from a prior life and wants to treat Presley, who reassures him that he's managing to control his ominous intrusion. But I can live with it, doc, like a wart. That's my decision, I live with it. Sina isn't so easily convinced. He tells him that, quote, if it's a wart, it could be cancerous. Unwanted thoughts of that sort don't disappear so easily, and if they are of the growing sort, as we suspect, we have to burn them out completely, end quote. Can nostalgia indeed be cancerous? Not just the leaked memory syndrome of Vasanji's speculative world, but also that most reviled of emotions in our own. The historian Charles Mayer once wrote that, quote, nostalgia is to longing what kitsch is to art, unquote. In spite of Mayer's curt dismissal, nostalgia, that ineffable emotion which accompanies loss and exile and displacement, has nonetheless also inspired the best writers, from Proust to Pessoa. But is it also inherently pathological? Sometimes it's freshly mown grass, sometimes the scent of jasmine, the acrid fumes of dried leaves burning on a lazy afternoon, the dusty smell and rubbery texture of a basketball, the loud ticking of a clock in an otherwise pin-drop silent room, a lion's roar. My mind often wanders back to these sensoria of a world lost but then inexplicably found. They're often remnants of my aunt Kalama's house in Hyderabad, Sindh, where we used to stay for a weekend every month in my childhood. It was a white, ranch-style bungalow in the government officer's residence colony, with a large, well-maintained garden, a vegetable patch, a solitary swing which my sister and I rode together. There used to be an old deflated basketball lying about the garden that I sometimes tried to dribble, but it never bounced. It might as well have been a flat tire. In the guest bedroom, which used to belong to Kalama's eldest son, who was away in the US for his medical training, my parents slept on the king-size bed and we siblings on mattresses on the floor. The room also had the loudest clock I've ever heard, and yet we would eventually doze off to its hypnotic ticks. That room was toward the back of the house, which opened to the Sehen, which in turn was the part of the house closest to the outside world. That world included the Rani Bagh, or Queen's Garden, a park established by British colonists in 1861, christened for Queen Victoria. It spread over 20 hectares of land and comprised zoological, botanical, and horticultural gardens. Though we never got to see the zoo of Rani Bagh, we were sure that they had lions because we could hear them as we were drifting off to sleep. They sounded in distress, and we tried to shut their roars out underneath the velvet comforters. My brother would sometimes try and scare us by saying that the lions had escaped the cage and would come this way looking for fresh toddlers to munch on. The clock ticked past midnight. The lions roared. Uncannily like Vasanji's Presley, I too am sometimes overtaken by this memory. It's midnight. The lions out. Did my version of this memory, like Presley's, also become cancerous? But not just metaphorically, but literally so. During those first months in Kalamazoo, was I so overcome with longing for that lost world of uncaged lions and obnoxiously loud clicks striking midnight that the doctors had to burn my insides to free me of it. I don't know if it worked. Sure, the cancer went into remission, but I think it did so not in spite of, but because of the persistence of memory. When Kalama's eldest son came to visit me in the hospital in my worst state, when he poured syrup onto my horrid hospital French toast and proceeded to cut it into little pieces and feed them to me, I was taken back to the times when he visited Pakistan from the US, when he played cricket with me and my siblings in the garden of his parents' house. That remnant of a lost world of innocence and warmth was a reprieve, allowing me to inhabit a time and a place where my body was free of any form of malignancy. What fascinates me is this Janus-phase duality of nostalgia. It is in fact both poison and antidote, pathology and cure. Nowadays, it has been resuscitated by psychologists as a boon for the depressed, as a harmless emotion capable of giving us comfort and fighting off feelings of existential dread or negative self-esteem. But when it emerged as an entity in the late 17th century, it referred to a debilitating disease, homesickness. If today nostalgia is considered a temporal affliction, a longing for a past that never was, its historical version was a spatial malady, a peculiar and often fatal form of melancholia triggered by a longing for home. The Swiss physician Johann Hofer first described nostalgia in his 1688 doctoral dissertation, coining it as a portmanteau, nostos from the Greek for homecoming and algos for pain. As the historian Thomas Dobman argues in What Nostalgia Was, the signs and symptoms of nostalgia were quite similar to those of melancholia, or what we today call depression. The reason that Hofer felt the need to devise a new diagnostic category, Dodman claims, was that Europe was undergoing unprecedented changes which came to bear on people's psyches, political revolutions, wars, and the colonization of faraway lands. As a child of a post-colonial nation state, nostalgia is most interesting in the context of colonialism. French and Dutch colonials, and to a lesser extent British ones, suffered in the unfamiliar and alienating climates of the tropics. Colonization was first hindered by the usual infectious diseases to which the colonists had no exposure: malaria, yellow fever, cholera. Once they had seasoned or adapted enough to these medical realities of tropical life, there followed the more psychological but no less deadly affliction of homesickness. Treatments for which included bloodletting, leeches placed on the anus, or simply sending the troops home. But the colonists eventually came up with less biomedical and more social treatments for the condition. Colonial settlements throughout the imperial world were built as facsimiles of European suburbs where not only tropical infections, but also nostalgia could be held at bay. So when the likes of Richard Burton praised the places like the Clifton of my childhood as the West End of Karachi, they meant it literally. The West End of London was cloned onto colonial spaces to defer the longing for home. All colonial memorials are signifiers of nostalgia, including the Rani Bagh of Queen Victoria, from where I heard the lions roaring at midnight. Thank you.
Wow, that's incredible, Bassam. Did you say where we can read the rest of that?
So the essay has not been published yet. So that was so we'll see. I'll let you know when it is.
Okay, coming soon to a wonderful publication near you. I can't wait to read the rest of that. Thank you so much. All right, and we're getting close to the end of our hour, so we have our last reader of the evening left. Pemi Aguda is from Lagos, Nigeria. She has an MFA from the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. She is a 2021 Fiction Fellow with the Miami Book Fair. Please join me in welcoming Pemi.
Thank you. It's an honor to read with all of you, and thank you, Freedom House, for the wonderful work you're doing. I'm going to be reading a short story, a very short story titled Contributions. It was originally published online in American Short Fiction. We have been practicing Esusu for a long time. Our mothers did it, our mothers' mothers did it, and probably their own mothers too. We've never had a problem of this substance before. Nothing so significant until this woman showed up. Nothing we couldn't fix anyway. This is how our system works. Each woman has 1 month to contribute a certain amount of naira. Our names are in a list, and when that month is over, whoever's number one takes it all. Then the contributions begin again, and at the end of the second month, number two collects. The names are always in random order. We go down the list until the last person has collected, then reset. This works for us. We don't need your banks, we don't need your loans, we can take care of ourselves. Things aren't always smooth. There was a time Iya Ibeji wasted her collection on a trip to Dubai, camel rides and shopping, and then couldn't make her contribution the next month. We had to seize her frozen food store's generator until she came up with the money. We are not wicked people, you must understand, but for this system to work, there has to be order. Another time, Mrs. B had to pay hospital bills for her son's operation. If we show pity even once, our structure will collapse on itself. So we seized Mrs. B's daughter. The daughter made meals for us. She carried our bags when we went to the market, relieving us of some burdens. She rubbed our feet and plaited our hair. When Mrs. B raised the money, we sent her daughter back home. We still have fond memories of the girl, her sweet smile, her spicy beef stew, the way she sprang lightly from foot to foot as if her bones were made of paper. Ours is a small group. We must be for trust for reliability. Not just everyone will accept our terms of admittance, both lifelong and strict. We take what we can until your obligations are met, and for many, this is too much power, too much risk. We haven't invited you here, we tell the ones who balk. Their necks tilted at besieging angles. Go try your luck at the banks. We've worked too hard to allow any stupid leniency that could risk sending us back to the gutters. So when the new woman came sniffing at our meeting with her crooked teeth and her shuku, we warned her. We asked if she was certain. Yes, she said she needed an alternative to the bank. Yes, she said she was sure. She was a cousin to one of our brother's best friends, and we said, okay, even if we were hesitant, our hands fiddling with wrappers, our chest sides, we welcomed her. At first, things went smoothly. Nonsense hardly ever shows itself immediately. She paid her contributions on time. She came to the meetings and drank Fanta and ate chin-chin with us. She weighed in on decisions like what color to wear to Sisi Oge's daughter's wedding, pink or burgundy, and whether we should collectively stop patronizing Nature's Way Spa because the owner elbowed one of us on the way to get communion at church. But by the 4th month, 6 away from her collection month, she started leaving texts on our phones, begging for more time. Look, it doesn't work this way. We appraised her life, checking for what we could seize, what we could take from her so she would understand the gravity of this commitment. We found nothing except a husband and an old mother in the village. We seized the husband. Alas, he was useless around our homes. He sat with our husbands, his big beer belly, and their big beer bellies all shuddering gelatinously in mirth at some distasteful joke. Her husband screamed at football games with us, played table tennis in our gardens, whooping like a fool whenever the ball thwacked against the paddle in his hand. Sometimes he looked at us. He looked at us and reminded us of the expanse of our hips, the heft of our breasts, reminded us of the ways our bodies take up space. We returned the husband and still she couldn't pay her contribution, so we seized her mother. Her mother was no better. The old woman sat brooding in corners, her eyes bulging out at us as we pounded yam or sewed on a button. She blended in with the cobwebs, her skin acquiring a dark fuzz, a gleaming scaliness exploiting the shifting shadows. And when she eventually turned into a frog, and then a lizard, and then a cat, our children squealed in delight. But when they tried to pet the cats, she scratched their hands, drawing blood, leaving scars in the shapes of a strange language. She leaped away from our punishing arms to perch high above our heads, and we strained our necks to look at her, envying the fluffy agility, the way she could wrangle her body into a smaller, lighter version of itself, stealthy and wily and out of reach. We sent the mother away and called the woman in. What else could she give us to hold on to until she could make her contribution? We sat her in the center of the group so she could feel our eyes prick at her skin from every direction, feel the pressure of our disappointment. Look, she said, will you take my arms? Her arms were long and muscular and had known work. We accepted them. They were useful in our kitchens, these arms, chopping ugu leaves here, stirring a pot of ewedu there, pounding yams, slicing apples. They were useful in the household, sweeping dust down the corridor and rocking a child to sleep. Sometimes the arms wrapped around us when our husbands were yelling, or when the children were crying again, or when the sky looked the wrong shade of blue. But still, she couldn't make her contribution, so we held on to her arms. My legs, she asked when the next month she still couldn't pay. She sat, armless, collapsed boba sleeves at her sides in the middle of the circle, her head bowed so that her braids hid her face from her questioning eyes. We had never seen such ineptitude before, such resignation to giving away body parts. But her legs were sturdy, with firm calves that could kick a football with our sons, and strong knees that braced our daughters' heads when we plaited their hair, and a lap that received our heads when we wept because the sky was still the wrong shade of blue, and our eyes felt heavy in our heads. My torso, she offered. My head, she contributed. Her voice got airier with each new part given. And what use were these breasts, this stomach, this heavy head filled with skull? But we took and we took and we took. It wasn't until we had all her body parts that we saw what she had done. Had we too not always wanted to shed our parts, be lighter, be nothing, be free? Would we also not give anything to have our bodies no longer belong to us? Now we do not speak about it because we are too ashamed to acknowledge how she deceived us into carrying her, bearing her weight forever, her sinew and bones and teeth and muscle and breath and blood. We avoid each other's eyes as we discuss contributions and collections. When we shuffle out of meetings, our shoulders hunch, our treads drag from the burden of her, from carrying what we have taken. Thank you.
Wow. Way to close us out, Pemi. Thank you so much for that stunning reading. Thank you all for reading and for coming out to support Freedom House. And John, I will kick it back to you to give us some closing words.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to all of our readers for sharing your work with us this evening and for such a wonderful cause. Donate to Freedom House. You can do so. There's a link in the chat, and if you're watching us later on YouTube, there is a link to donate in the description below me. The dog is making a wonderful cameo at the end. Fantastic. Oh my gosh, so cute. Well, thanks again to all of our readers and to all of our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us this evening at Home with Literati, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Take care all. Have a great night.